I wish to tell you some of the contents of the study programme of the Quest series. We have 8 lectures every year for 3 years. That's a total of 24 lectures or meetings, which are about 3 to 3.5 hours each. There'll be breaks, naturally, and there'll be discussions during that period. You can register 1 year at a time, or indeed you may come along for 1 lecture. The logos symbol is the emblem of our course, an ancient Greek idea of a vast creative intelligence which saturates the universe. We hope that participants will take this as an inspiration in the search for their own vision. Now, our visionaries, who number 25 to 30, are too numerous to mention in detail. But let me explain to you some of the issues on the quest and some of the visionaries. For example, we study the mystical visions of the Orient and the West. The Kabbalah, William Blake, Sri Aurobindo, the Hindu mystic of the early 20th century. The Gnostic Gospels around the time of Christ are all part of our syllabus. We also examine the new visions emerging from science, particularly the ones in physics and biology, with people like Teilhard de Chardin and Fritjof Capra, who have pointed to an immense new vision or paradigm which is reshaping our vision of the cosmos and ourselves. We look at the origin and history of human consciousness. For example, the emergence of Homo sapiens. How did our species evolve? When did it evolve? And what were the development sequences in our consciousness which we can detect and present as a meaningful development of our consciousness? We look at the theory of Erich Neumann, the great Jungian scholar, who presented the history of consciousness through examination of the history of mythologies. We ask, is there a meaning to history? Has all this development just been about power and struggle and the survival of the fittest? Are there other principles in history and some meaningful development, particularly of our consciousness? Are we meant to be here? We examine Arnold Toynbee, for example, the great British historian. Also Andrew Marr and Yuval Harari, who has presented a wonderful new book called Sapiens, in which these complex ideas are presented in a very accessible manner. We also explore the history and development of capitalism, which is the major economic system which has shaped our planet. We look at the major visionaries. Adam Smith, who in 1776 presented in his book The Wealth of Nations a theory of free markets, which was so radically different from previous mercantile and state-run systems, and that presented capitalism as one of the freedom of markets, an idea which has been very powerful in the shaping of capitalism right up to the present. We look at Karl Marx in the 1860s, diametrically opposed to Adam Smith, as it were, because he presents capitalism not as a creative system of freedom, but rather a system that was doomed to crisis. Indeed, so much crisis that it would be replaced by a totally different system based upon principles of justice and humanity. He saw capitalism as inevitably doomed to deep crisis. In the 1930s, we look at 2 great economists and philosophers, thinkers, Friedrich Hayek on the one hand and John Maynard Keynes on the other. Hayek, in opposition to the Nazis and to the rise of totalitarianism, was very anxious to maintain the freedoms within the capitalist system, or the democracies which he believed had emerged as a result of it. Keynes realised that capitalism had its inevitable serious flaws which could lead to its downfall and replacement. But, brilliant as he was, he thought of ways in which a new engineering system could be formulated, in which the economy could be, as it were, fine-tuned, full employment created, and the deep crisis avoided through manipulation of aggregate money demand. Through these technical means, he managed to formulate a new vision of the capitalist system which has lasted on and off up to the present day. So the history of the visionaries of capitalism has undergone substantial changes over time. The most powerful economic system the planet has ever experienced, we need to understand, because the forces of capitalism are deeply shaping the present world crisis. We present capitalism as a system of creative destruction. We also consider at the extreme the possibilities of human extinction, or at least deep trauma to our species. We will look to many visionaries in this process, for example James Lovelock and his theory of Gaia, that is, the world as a self-regulating system, which has been deeply disturbed by the anthropos, by mankind, who is now causing the major changes on the planet. Other issues we examine include Beethoven's Third Symphony, partly as relief from the heavy texts which may have preceded, but also because in the Third Symphony there is also a world of meaning and vision which we can discover. This is the mythology of the hero's quest, an ancient concept, archetypal idea presented by Carl Jung as one of the dominant archetypal motifs of mythological history. The hero's quest is one of descent and then ascent and the creation of a new consciousness or a new paradigm and vision, exactly the central motif of the quest course. We also look at Wagner's Ring Cycle, which is a musical mythology on the nature of consciousness, its origins in a very problematic beginning, a bit like the Garden of Eden in the Bible, where the ring is stolen and some deep disturbance to human consciousness and the original state of nature occurs. And a prognosis of the future, which is quite dark but mystical, in which Wagner foresees the end of Valhalla, or the end of the world as we know it, ending in fire and water, interestingly enough. Turner's paintings are also examined as another great visionary, akin to the visions of the Orient, of the mystic perception of the light. All of this is to develop our inner and collective vision. We ask questions such as, is the universe conscious? Or has consciousness, in the modern materialist worldview, developed as some kind of later accident of the evolution in the universe? Or rather, is it primary or coexistent with matter from the very beginning? We ask, does the cosmos have a soul? Religious people have thought that souls are just belonging to human beings. But could it be that the whole cosmos has a soul and we are part of it? We ask, is spiritual enlightenment really possible? Is it possible for the whole species or just for individuals? And what does it consist of? Carl Jung, the great mystic, psychologist, psychotherapist and philosopher of the 20th century, has a place of honour on our course, as indeed do some of his followers, such as Anne Baring, who's written a recent book called Dream of the Cosmos, A Quest for the Soul, or Ian McGilchrist, whose theory of the two hemispheres needing some reunification to regain our wholeness is akin to Jung's ideas of the conscious and the unconscious, which need to be reunited from the split which has occurred inside the human consciousness as the mind and consciousness, the left hemisphere so to speak, has become more and more dominant until it's forgotten the right hemisphere, forgotten the unconscious and forgotten its deep roots. Other issues examined are what's been known as the perennial philosophy. That is a philosophy which we can detect across the ages, not only back through all civilization, but back into shamanic times and times of the great mother philosophies and religions, in which a perennial, that is an everlasting, across the ages philosophy, that there is a reality underneath our phenomenal world which determines it. This perennial, long-lasting idea, concept, comes through to modern times, for example with David Bohm, who's written a book called Wholeness and the Implicate Order, by which he means that there is an implicate order, that is some underlying determining reality which determines the explicate order, which is the phenomenal world we live in. So, mystics, physics, modern science, this new vision combines all these elements. It includes also a systems view of life as presented and championed by Fritjof Capra, which argues that the life system from its very beginning is self-organising, self-developing, and has a system of creative evolution and development naturally within it. We look at radically different economic and political and philosophical paradigms for the whole planet. These are just a sample of what we study across the Quest programme.